Thank you very much, Deputy President. And I rise to make a contribution about this bill, which has been recommitted to this parliament.
Could you just please move the second reading, Senator Bragg?
Right. Thank you, Deputy President. My apologies. I move that this bill be read a second time.
Thank you, Senator Bragg. You can continue.
Well, thank you, Deputy President. The reason this bill has been recommitted for debate in this 48th Parliament is because the maladministration, the integrity failures and the performance failures of this housing scheme would be one of the greatest failures of public policy in my lifetime. And this is a fund, this Housing Australia Future Fund, which holds $10 billion of the people's money. So far, the scoreboard from this fund for $10 billion is the acquisition of 300 houses, thereby making the housing crisis worse. Who could imagine that the government of Australia would be competing with people in a constrained housing market? 300 houses acquired, 17 houses built in the Capital Territory. That's the scoreboard so far for $10 billion. It's not going well. But the broader issue here goes to the integrity of public finances. $10 billion. This integrity bill is designed to ensure that these funds will not be plundered by the criminal mafia elements of the CFMEU and its related party fund, the Cbus organisation. The CFMEU is responsible for a 30% premium on apartment buildings in parts of Australia. Now, for many younger Australians, their first house is not going to be a standalone brick-built house. It will be a small apartment. And this 30% CFMEU criminal mafia tax on Australian housing, brought to you by the Labor Party, should not be tolerated. But what we have here is a $10 billion fund of taxpayers' money which could, in fact, go into business with those same people. The people that brought you the housing crisis, the CFMEU, could actually have their fund, the Cbus fund, engaged by the HAF, the Housing Australia Future Fund. That is an outrage. And so this bill principally seeks to exclude that organisation, or any organisation connected with the criminal mafia elements of the CFMEU, from accessing taxpayer funds. That is the point of this bill. Now, we have seen over these last few years a very, very close relationship between the CFMEU, the Cbus and the Labor Party. Now, after the government won the 2022 election, one of their first acts was to abolish the Building and Construction Commission. Abolish it. If ever you need evidence that this is a government for vested interests, that is it. One of the first acts to abolish the strong cop on the beat. And then we saw throughout the last parliament very close engagement between the Cbus Super Fund and the government. And in fact, the Treasurer, Mr Chalmers, filed a false public interest immunity claim with this parliament to protect documents given to him by Cbus, which is chaired by his former boss, Mr Wayne Swan, who's also the president of the Labor Party. Mr Chalmers filed a false public interest immunity claim to protect documents from being exposed to public glare, which were mainly about private lobbying private lobbying that the Cbus fund was engaging in because it didn't want to disclose certain taxes and fees to its members. Very untransparent and a very large failure of integrity. And so, look, it doesn't surprise me, Deputy President, that in the newspaper today, in the Sydney Morning Herald, there is a headline, "Secretive Albanese government goes backwards on transparency." This government has gone out of its way to obfuscate and block freedom of information requests and to frustrate the Senate's requests for documents. Now, we are paid to do these jobs here in Canberra, to get to the bottom of problems, to expose wrongdoing, and to give the Australian people the transparency that they deserve in a liberal democracy. And this government has gone out of its way to block those processes from being properly undertaken. And all you have to do is go through and look at the OPDs, orders for production of documents, which have been provided to this Senate, which are replete with blackout. There's more blackout than there is text, whether it's an FOI or whether it's an OPD. And as I say, Deputy President, what happened in the last parliament was the Treasurer of the Commonwealth filed a false public interest immunity claim to protect his mate, Mr Swan, and Cbus. Now, the only reason we know the contents of that secret lobbying is not because the parliamentary process worked under this government. It is not. The reason we know is because of the Information Commissioner. The Information Commissioner assessed the FOI, and the Information Commissioner found that there was no case for a commercial in confidence claim by Mr Chalmers, that this was secret lobbying and the public deserved to know. Thank God for the Information Commissioner. I'm an atheist, but thank goodness for the Information Commissioner. But we shouldn't have to rely on the Information Commissioner. The government treats the parliament like garbage. They have no respect for our constitutional obligations to hold them to account. They have no genuine commitment to the promises they made about integrity and transparency. And the numbers, as published in the Sydney Morning Herald today, give you all the evidence that is required. Now, coming back to this bill, we have been able to, because of a largely blacked out OPD, discover the details of the first round of the Housing Australia Future Fund tender. And in that tender, the government has given significant funds to an organisation called Assemble, which apparently is going to be building houses in Melbourne. Now, the site and the legal description of the buildings are blacked out, of course, top secret. We shouldn't be able to know where taxpayer funds are going to build houses. And also the funding arrangements through the availability payments, which is how the taxpayer funds are transferred to organisations like Assemble, is also blacked out. So we are not allowed to know how taxpayer funds are being expended in relation to the Housing Australia Future Fund. And the relevance here, Deputy President, between Assemble and the CFMEU and Cbus is that this is a consortium of super funds. This is the government funneling money through the Housing Australia Future Fund to their favourite vested interests at the big super funds that they want to make the perpetual landlords of Australians. The government's agenda in housing is to give money to the super funds so they can own houses that Australians can never own, because the government is more focused on the narrow vested interests of their favourite constituencies of the unions and the super funds and all the other bloodsuckers than they are on the interests of working Australians. They think it's better that a big fund, big institutional fund, could be a super fund, it might be the Qatari Sovereign Investment Fund, which they've given a tax cut to, so they can own build-to-rent houses for 15 years that will never be owned by Australians. They don't care. Their agenda is institutions first and the people last, because they have become the party of organised vested interest, the party of organised capital. And so the reason that this amendment to the housing program is needed is because there can be no place for criminal mafia elements of the CFMEU in the nation's housing program. As bad as this program is, in terms of its failure to deliver, after 2 years of operation, it has delivered 17 houses in the Capital Territory and it has acquired 300 houses, making the housing crisis worse. But surely everyone here would agree taxpayer funds shouldn't be going to the CFMEU and its constituent bodies. And we shouldn't forget that the CFMEU has been put into administration by this parliament. But the CFMEU still controls a number of board seats on the Cbus fund. It still appoints board members to the super fund, even though it's an administration. And the trust that holds the licence, that owns the Cbus fund, is owned by the CFMEU in part, 21%. So we're living in a country where a union can be put into administration by the parliament, but it can still own a massive retirement fund. And that retirement fund, which makes distributions back to that union in administration, can apparently participate in a taxpayer-funded housing scheme. So it is very regrettable that we are in this situation, and we want the government to be the best government it can be. But the reason it's failed on housing and has built fewer houses than the last government is because it's put all its faith in Canberra-based bureaucracies, which don't build houses. And it's obsessed over its favourite vested interests. The housing crisis will never be solved by a singular Canberra bureaucracy. The government needs to go out there and talk to the people who are needed to solve this housing crisis. And it may shock you, Deputy President, it may shock you, the Canberra bureaucrats don't build many houses. They shuffle a lot of papers, I'm sure very well, and I'm certain that there are many paper cuts. But the people that build houses are builders, tradespeople, developers. And the government needs to talk to these people to work out how it might actually achieve its target. Because under the last coalition government, on average, there were 200,000 houses built every year. Under this government, we're down to 170,000 houses a year, despite allowing more than 1 million people into the country. They have presided over a massive collapse in housing. They have built bureaucracy and not houses. They've wasted billions of dollars on bureaucracies which don't build many houses. And apparently they are allowed to get into bed with the criminal mafia elements of the CFMEU and the Cbus. So in closing, the government has talked a big game on transparency and integrity. We know that it has failed to deliver on its proper obligations in relation to FOIs and OPDs. It's been the most secretive government in living memory, and it's presided over a disgraceful maladministration of taxpayer funds in relation to the Housing Australia Future Fund. One small change it could make to improve the governance integrity of this scheme is to guarantee the Australian people that taxpayer funds will not be exposed to the people who helped cause the housing crisis, the CFMEU, the same people who added 30% tax onto new apartments, which squeeze the life out of the Australian dream for young people. Young people can't get a first apartment because of the CFMEU's 30% tax brought to you by the Labor Party. These people should not have access to taxpayer funds, and I urge the Senate to look at this clearly and cleanly and to vote for integrity when this comes to a vote.